and welcome. This is my second appearance on 31 on 31 with Autop Stream, and today we're going to be talking about comedies. Now, in my opinion, comedy, just like horror movies, are very subjective. What I think is hilarious and an all-time classic may not even register on other people's lists. Everyone has a different shade of comedy that they prefer. I truthfully believe satire and comedy are very important in a society because we are acting like idiots at times and we need to laugh at ourselves and realize how idiotic we're behaving. And when it comes to the comedy movies we're going to discuss, I want to reiterate that these are great films. Some of these movies can be considered an all-time classic, and I'm pretty sure a lot of these movies are going to be in your top 10. And it may not even be in the top 10 of others. And I'm so convinced that this year that all of our rankings are going to be so different from one another's that John Connor's going to throw a fit. He's the one who does our averages. And before I get started with the rankings, I want you to understand what my mindset was as I was ranking these movies out. Some of these movies have a strong nostalgic pull on me that I could not help but place them where they are. And you'll know what those movies are when I discuss them. Then there's movies that I thought were hysterical when I first saw them in the 90s, and then upon seeing it again, I outgrew the humor, so they weren't funny to me upon a second viewing. And there's going to be some movies that are classics that I didn't see as a kid, so that I had no nostalgic tether to them, and I was completely disconnected with the material, and you'll know what those movies are as I go about this list. And that being said, let's go ahead and get started with this year's 31 on 31. 31 movies, 31 comedies, my God. Looks like I picked the wrong week to quit drinking. Coming in at 31 is Funny People. Yes, this movie is kind of funny, but in my opinion, it has no place in this ranking because it's more of a drama with some funny moments. I mean, think about it. Yeah, Blazing Saddles, Airplane, National Lampoon's Vacation, Coming to America, and then this. It's like, it's good. It's not a bad movie. It's a great movie with great characters, great cast. It's got some funny moments, but it's a drama. Who the hell picked this? One of these things is not like the other, and that's it. You have Adam Sandler, who's more or less playing Adam Sandler in this film, but his name is George Simmons. He finds out that he is dying. Once he finds out, he's looking at his legacy. He's looking at the films he's made, and he wants to pass it on. So he finds a comedian played by Seth Rogen and brings him under his wing as a mentor to have him write for him. But this film is way too long. It's 2.5 hours, and in my opinion, it wears out its welcome with a third act that is very, if you look at it with an adult set of eyes, very inappropriate. He's breaking up a marriage is what he's trying to do, so I can't root for the guy. And again, this film is a drama with some comedic moments, so again, it is a great movie. I'm not saying it's bad, but for me, it's coming in at 31. Coming in at number 30 is Multiplicity, starring Michael Keaton, the great Michael Keaton. And this film was not funny. Why is it ranked above Funny People? Well, I feel this is a genuine comedy and not a drama, so that's why. So there you go. In this film, we have Michael Keaton who plays a father who's just overworked, and he can't be everywhere all at once. He's got a family and kids, and he'd love to be there. He then bumps into the scientist who can clone him, and he finds a solution to his problems. Hey, I'll have one clone work at the job while I spend time with the family. And before you know it, 2 other clones show up, and again, once the novelty of the multiple Michael Keatons wears off, it just kind of runs its course, and it's just okay. Now, when this movie came out, I didn't get a chance to see it, but when I finally did a couple of weeks ago, I think I chuckled once. And that's when I saw the name of the community that he was building homes in, Vista de Nada. That's hilarious. And I'm not saying Michael Keaton isn't funny. You have Beetlejuice, you have the Squeeze, you have the other guys, Mr. Mom. With the right script, he is a funny person. And with this particular one, I think they're more relying heavily on the novelty of having multiple Michael Keatons than the actual jokes. So that is why it's coming in at number 30. Coming in at 29 is Weird Science, where 2 horny teenagers want to learn how to talk to girls, so they build a woman in a computer so she can teach them how to talk. You know, they had sex with her. So they create a woman with the powers of Q from Star Trek, played by Kelly LeBrock, and she teaches them how to make out, how to have sex. I think there's that one scene where they imply they had sex. That one kid did wake up with panties on, so. And she teaches these 2 young men that wealth and money is what really matters in the 80s to get popularity. And if you want to overcome any problems, you pull a gun on the person. She pulled a gun on this kid's parents, and then the kids pulled a gun on the problem at the end of the movie. It's the 80s. What are you going to do? Now, I will admit I saw this film way too old. If I had seen it growing up as a horny teenager, I probably would have loved it, and it would have been nostalgic for me, and it would be a lot higher in my rankings today. But that's not the case. I saw it as an old bastard, and I didn't like it. It was fun. It was cool to see a young Bill Paxton, Robert Downey Jr., and the guy from Nightmare on Elm Street 2. But again, it wasn't made for me as an old bastard, so I missed my window. And I recognize that this is one of John Hughes' movies, but in my opinion, it's not one of his best. That is why I have it near the bottom at 29. Coming in at 28 is my least favorite Will Ferrell movie, and that is Talladega Nights. Talladega Nights? Talladega Nights. The character of Ricky Bobby never appealed to me, to be totally honest, and it's one of my least favorite characters that Will Ferrell has actually performed. I mean, there's other movies that he's done that are very high on this list, so just keep that in mind. In my opinion, John C. Reilly is the funniest person in this movie, and him and Will Ferrell are gold together. We'll talk about Step Brothers later. But in my opinion, he's the only funny part in this movie. That one sequence where him and Ricky Bobby's wife want to get married, and he's like, I want you to get over that, and you're going to be in the wedding. He's like, no, man. That whole sequence is funny. But overall, it's just not for me. Again, I think it is funny. It's got some moments, but it's not one of Will Ferrell's best or John C. Reilly's best. And we'll get to that other film later on, much higher in the rankings in this video. But for right now, the Talladega Nights comes in at 28. Coming in at 27 is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And believe it or not, I never saw this movie either growing up. I just saw it a couple years ago because these guys told me to see it. And you know what? I loved it. And it's a great movie. It's hard for me to put this movie in the category of the other films that we're referring to because this is such a wonderful movie with great characters. I just don't see it as a comedy. It's a drama because this is the only film in this list that made me cry at the end. I'm not going to give the spoiler away, but the ending had me in tears. It's well acted. Of course, John Candy and Steve Martin are just epic. And of course, it's a John Hughes movie, and this movie is a precursor. If you put this movie and 16 Candles together, you'll kind of get a Home Alone. Holidays, trying to get back home, somebody's forgotten. You get it? It's the same shit. And I don't want you to think that I'm taking anything away from this movie. It's a wonderful movie. I see it more as a holiday classic. I put that in the pool of Die Hard and Christmas Vacation kind of pool of movies instead of a comedy, if that makes any sense. In my opinion, just like Funny People, this movie is more of a drama with some comedic moments than a comedy. So that is why I have it so low. But again, I'm not taking anything away from this. It's a wonderful movie. That is why I have it at number 27. Now, coming in at 26 is The Cable Guy. Believe it or not, I have never seen this Jim Carrey movie, not even in the 90s. I just saw it about a month ago. And again, I remember in the 90s when people were talking about it, they said it wasn't funny. I understand it bombed, and it was his least successful comedy of the 90s, and he rebounded right after the fact with Liar Liar. So walking into this film not knowing what to expect, I will admit there were some funny parts. I did laugh out loud at some of the situations these characters are in, but I didn't think it was hilarious. I mean, there's plenty of other films on this list that are way superior than this. And I get the misdirection. I get what they were trying to go forward with. Again, with Ben Stiller movies, the audience is always obsessed with something. In this particular movie, it's with cable TV and television. And then with Zoolander, you have fashion. We're all obsessed with the fashion icons. And then with Tropic Thunder, his masterpiece, in my opinion, you have people that are obsessed with celebrity, and we hone in on those people. In Cable Guy, we see what happens when somebody is raised with television, and it's not a pretty situation. Now, the movie does have some funny moments. I will give it that, and I will give total credit to Jim Carrey with his performance with this particular actor. I mean, he's kind of showcasing some of his acting chops with this movie. He went on to do Man on the Moon and a few others to show that, hey, he's a legit actor. So I will applaud him for giving us something different. Then the third act comes along and you're really confused on how this is all supposed to wrap up. Again, there are some funny moments in it. I give Jim Carrey, as I mentioned, total credit for the performance he gave. But again, it's not a movie I would recommend as far as a comedic movie, or I have a bunch of people in the house. I'm like, hey, let's all sit down and watch a comedy. I got an idea. Let's watch Cable Guy. No, this would not even be anywhere near my radar. So again, I appreciate for what it's trying to do. And again, Ben Stiller only got better with his films. And again, that's why I have it at 26. Coming in at 25 is Knocked Up, and I do love this movie. It's a great Judd Apatow movie, and I can relate to the source material, being, young at one point and being a father now later in life. I love how the movie shows and showcases two types of lives. You have, what's her name? What the fuck's her name? Katherine Heigl and Seth Rogen. They meet, they know it's just like an accidental thing that happens. They create a child, and just that whole viewpoint of them realizing that their lives are about to change and how they handle that. That's very accurate to everybody who I think who's had a kid and maybe it wasn't planned. So I love that they're showcasing, real emotions on how they're feeling about this whole change in life. And I also love that we get to see Leslie Mann and Paul Rudd, who are definitely married and have been married for quite some time, and set in their ways and how they banter back and forth. And I love how that was so great and wonderful for the audience. They made This Is 40, which I feel that movie should have been on this list. I love This Is 40. Very accurate to what real life is. I like to think of these movies as a coming of age movie, similar to the teenage movies where you have like Boyhood, and then what's the other one? Dazed and Confused, where people are going from high school to becoming a young adult. There's that transition. There's like the future, what's going to happen, you know, that journey. Here it's the same thing. When you're an adult and your life changes when you have kids, there's a lot of questions you have. There's a lot of doubt that you have. There's a lot of fear. And I love that this movie in a comedic way highlights those doubts and that fear and that overall love and excitement that you have, and all the waves of emotion that one goes through when they find out they're going to bring a kid into this world and not 100% sure if they're ready or what's going to happen. So this film does this beautifully. So I will give it that, and that is why I have it at 25. Coming in at 24 is the raunchy comedies of the early 2000s and yesteryear that I miss fondly is Road Trip. And of course, you can't make films like this anymore. People get butthurt, offended, and get the cast and crew canceled or somebody fired just because of jokes that hurt their feelings. God, I wish we can go back. But in this film, you have a raunchy comedy where you have this young man and his girlfriend who have been together since they were kids, and they go to college and go their separate ways. And she hasn't spoken to him in a few days, so he thinks that she is cheating on him. So he gets drunk one day. He makes a tape with this one girl, and he accidentally mails that tape over to her because they had this kind of like correspondence where it is so funny to see this film. This is only 24 years old, but you see how old it is. He was sending her videotapes. Like nowadays, we can just go on our video phones and just chat right away. He was recording off a camera and mailing her videotapes just to say, hey, what's up? We've come a long way in 24 years, maybe backwards in some cases. But once he finds out the tape was mailed, then he goes on a road trip and he and his friends go through all these shenanigans and tomfoolery. And of course, Tom Green is in it. This is Tom Green when he was more or less at his apex of popularity. You have the MTV show that he was on that was really popular. I remember that. He was also in Charlie's Angels. So Tom Green was right up there. And again, it's been that long since I've seen the movie, and I saw it last night. And you know what? I was laughing my ass off. And again, I wish they made more comedies like this anymore. But again, unfortunately, in the climate that we're in, you can't. But again, it's aged well. I appreciate the vulgarity of the movie because we really don't get that anymore. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And again, it's like a time capsule of the early 2000s. And there's no cell phones. Again, he's sending her videotapes so they can speak to one another. That's pretty cool. And seeing it again as an older man versus when I saw it, I was like 23 when this first came out. I appreciate it. You can tell like the dialogue and just the way of thinking was written by an older guy. Of course, this is, I believe Todd Phillips, one of his first movies. He plays a quick cameo in the movie as well, but it was a great film to watch. I was watching it with my fiance, and there's that scene in the beginning where they're in the sorority house or something like that, fraternity house, and they're auctioning off women. And I'm like, can you believe did that happen? She was like a college girl. She was like, yeah, I did. I'm like, really? Were you auctioned? Seriously, were you? That's why I have Road Trip at 24. Maybe I should put it higher. Nah, 24 is good. Coming in at 23 is Zoolander, Ben Stiller's second film. And if you ask me, it's his masterpiece. How do you begin to describe Zoolander? You have a male model, Eric Zoolander, who's won 3 Male Model of the Year awards in a row. He thinks he's going to win the 4th, but he loses to Hansel, played by Owen Wilson, and he goes on this discovery of who am I? Off note, back in the early 2000s when this movie came out, a lot of people at my job said I looked like Eric Zoolander, and I would do the impression in the blue steel face, and people would just crack up. I never saw it, but I went with it, you know? I hadn't seen this movie in a few years, so I decided to revisit it, and it's just as ridiculous as I remember. It's funny to see all these outdated A-listers at the time. You know, you have, what's his name? Did it all for the Nookie. What the fuck's his name? Lead singer, Limp Bizkit. Fred Durst is who I meant to say. You see him there, and David Bowie's in it, and I mean, God rest his soul. So it's pretty cool to see this movie. And again, it's kind of like a time capsule of the early 2000s, so I really enjoyed it. It's a great follow-up if you ask me when you look at Cable Guy, which I didn't find amusing whatsoever. And what I love about the Ben Stiller movies is that he's poking fun at us, the audience. It's a satire on what we worship. At the time, it was cable TV and court cases in the 90s, hence Cable Guy. Then you have male modeling, VH1. Celebrity was approaching its apex, and I think it reached its apex when Tropic Thunder came out. So he's really poking fun at the American audience. I still haven't seen Zoolander 2. I have no intentions on watching it, but Zoolander, again, is a perfect time capsule of the early 2000s, and I really enjoyed it. Zoolander is not just a movie, it's a lifestyle. It's a glimpse into the glamorous yet hazardous world of male modeling. It's about friendship, finding yourself, and most importantly, looking really, really good while doing it. That is why it's at 23. I should do the blue steel look, right? Coming in at 22 is In Bruges Now. I don't know. I think it was Brian's idea to have this movie in this list. I don't recall, but this movie is a definite outlier. When you look at the list, I remember looking at it, I'm like, what the fuck is in Bruges? I'm watching it, and the first 30 minutes are slow. I'm hating this movie. Then the film starts to kick in. And I ended up loving this movie. It's actually very funny. It's very smart. It's got that dry humor that I love, that very matter of fact humor. And this movie is so dark, not super dark, but it's got a dark sense of humor to the fact that there's just some conversations that are being made, and it's just really matter of fact. And I'm cracking up at what's being said about certain wars that are going to happen. But there is something very there's something incredibly graphic that happens at the end, which is like the big punchline. And if you would have told me that I would have seen this movie and be laughing about seeing somebody with their head shot off, I would have been, what the fuck are you talking about? But this movie, something happens to where a certain somebody has their head shot off, and you cannot help but just crack up. I was cry laughing because I knew what was going to happen after the fact, but I was cry laughing so hard because of what had happened. And I never thought I'd be laughing that hard at this movie. So again, this movie took me by surprise. I know it's a film from overseas. No one's ever heard about it in the States that I know of. But again, this one really took me by surprise, and I loved it. So that's why I have it at 22. Coming in at 21 is Dumb and Dumberer. And I will admit, this film, I was a senior in high school when it came out. All my friends were ranting and raving about it because Jim Carrey had already done the Pet Detective movie. Ace Ventura Pet Detective is what I meant to say. So the hype in Living Color, everything was really just riding high. So a friend of mine went and saw it. He said it was the funniest movie he ever had seen. So I remember going, but we went a little high because we were smoking doobies back in high school, back in the 90s. And we went, and I thought it was the funniest movie I'd ever seen in my life. I was laughing so hard. It felt like I had done like 1,000 sit-ups, and I was on the floor just tear crying. And I hadn't seen the movie in a very long time, so I saw it last month, and it's got some funny moments, but I feel, in my opinion, that it really hasn't aged well for me. I mean, it's still one of Jim Carrey's best comedies, but as you can see, me having it at 21, it's okay. And again, I could have had it ranked higher, but that's more nostalgia talking, not my current opinion right now. And that's what I want to give you. But again, it is funny to me. When I look at it, I'm more laughing with nostalgia versus the comedy. Again, it just hasn't aged well for me, but I will acknowledge at the time when it came out, it was one of the funniest movies I had ever seen. And that is why I have Dumb and Dumber at 21. I was a senior in high school when that came out. Wow. I'm old. And coming in at 20 is The Hangover, directed by Todd Phillips. Now, I have to say, you've seen all these movies again. Todd Phillips, in my opinion, is a great comedic director. He's up there with Judd Apatow, in my opinion, as far as timing and that crude comedy. And it's unfortunate the films that he was made famous with, mean Road Trip, Old School, and The Hangover, you really can't make those anymore. I've already touched on that before, but it's depressing when I watch these movies in a way because these are the type of comedies that I love and gravitate to. The ones that are really just no rules. And again, it's unfortunate nowadays we can't have these comedies made. And The Hangover is a great film. You have four buddies going to Las Vegas for a bachelor party. They take some narcotics and they wake up and one of them's missing. And the whole entire film is them kind of backtracking the events of what happened because they're all blacked out to find their friend to take him back to his wedding. In my opinion, Zach Galifianakis is the one who steals the show. Bradley Cooper is also one of my personal favorites, but it's good to see that camaraderie with the cast. There is a genuine chemistry with all four of them, and you can see it. And and again, seeing the film for the first time in a number of years, I was laughing my butt off. And in my opinion, I recall this film being one of the last comedies where it had the power of word of mouth. People were talking about this. Maybe the Bridesmaids kind of had the same type of word of mouth, but everybody was saying you had to see this film. It was funny, and please stay for the post-credit scene because you're going to see a bunch of images that they took when they were blacked out drunk. So again, this movie just had this sort of like aura about it. You had to go see it. They knew it was controversial in some sense, but again, everyone loved it and was speaking highly about it. And again, we don't have that type of word of mouth anymore in Hollywood when it comes to comedies, unless it's a superhero movie. That is what I remember about The Hangover, and that is why I have it at number 20. Coming in at 19 is Groundhog Day, which has got such a unique premise that it's been replicated by Tom Cruise in that movie Edge of Tomorrow, and then Happy Death Day. It's a fun formula, and this film, again, holds up for me. I think AMC shows it every weekend. But Bill Murray plays a meteorologist who's like a narcissistic asshole. Like he doesn't like anybody. He just wants to keep to himself, but he ends up in this time loop. And from what I read, like an online, like a scripts and what people theorize, that time loop was actually like 10,000 years. So that's why it explains the suicidal sequences of him killing himself in the film. But I love how it's more or less just like what an everyday man would do. If you're caught in this time loop, what would you do? He robs an armored car. He more or less sleeps with every woman in town. And I especially love this sequence because I quote it all the time with my fiance when we're trying to pick a film to watch. She's like, but you've already seen that movie. I'm like I said, I've seen it 100 times. I love this film. And call me Bronco.
It's like I said, I love this film. I've seen it over 100 times.
Phil?
Told you. Call me Bronco.
And again, this is one of Bill Murray's best films. It's because what makes it funny is it's not really the jokes and what he says. It's how he says it. It's just dry and just to the point, a matter of fact. So again, one of his best films. And again, like I said, you can love him like in this movie. You can hate him in Kingpin. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But again, Groundhog Day, absolute classic. I love it. That's why I have it at 19. Call me Bronco. Coming in at 18 is Kingpin, starring Woody Harrelson and Randy Quaid, and this is also directed by the Farrelly brothers. Now, I will admit, I saw this movie one time in my entire life. I saw it at the movies, and you know what? Me and my friends at the time in 1996, which is almost 30 years ago, Jesus Christ, we laughed our asses off. This was a hilarious movie, and again, I think their crescendo, their masterpiece is Something About Mary, and we'll talk about that later. So again, seeing the movie for the first time in 30 years, it's sad to say I think I outgrew the humor because it really didn't age well, and seeing it again, it's kind of a sad movie. I feel really bad for Roy Munson in this. Roy Munson is a prodigy bowler. He's got the future ahead of him, and his future is robbed when his hand is removed after a gambling scheme went awry, is what I meant to say. And I think this is the only film Bill Murray has ever done where I genuinely hate him with a passion. He's a sleazebag. And the story itself is kind of sad and pathetic. Again, this guy, Roy Munson, has his future robbed from him because of Bill Murray, his character. And in the end, Bill Murray ends up winning, so the bad guy still wins. And the bad guy even slept with Roy Munson's woman. So nothing goes right for this guy. He genuinely is a born loser, and there's no comeuppance for the bad guy. There's no redemption in a sense. He still loses at the end. So it's kind of heartbreaking seeing it again. It's like, wow, I feel bad for the guy. But again, the movie was good because it is like a time capsule of the late 90s. It's pretty funny to hear ska music being played in transition scenes, just like in Road Trip. Who the hell likes ska music now? That's like, I'm glad that's gone over with. And speaking of which, why did I have Road Trip at 24? I enjoyed Road Trip more than Kingpin. So you know what? I think I ranked Kingpin at 18 based on nostalgia, but I'm flip it, okay? So Kingpin is now at 24 and Road Trip is at 18, okay? I'm changing my vote. I'm changing my rankings mid-filming. So there it is. I changed my mind. Road Trip is at 18. Kingpin is at 24. I can do what I want. Coming in at 17 is Old School, and I swear this movie has aged like fine wine. I love it. I love it because when this movie came out, I was just a new husband. I was just married a couple years, so I saw it from that perspective, and now divorced 16 years later, and then single for a while, and then re-engaged. I see this movie from a many perspective, and I totally appreciate every character. I can actually see the movie from the perspective of Vince Vaughn, Will Ferrell, and of course, Mitch, because I've been in that space in some form or fashion, and it's very accurate to real life in an extent. I know that sounds ridiculous me saying, but it's very accurate to the expectations of marriage, to how your mind changes, that inner part of you that still wants a party like it used to be, but now you find out you can't because now you're married, how marriages end, like sexual desires that Mitch's wife had that he was totally unaware about. You'd be surprised how many marriages are actually like that. And this movie brings that truth, that uncomfortable truth, to the surface. And again, what I appreciate watching these Todd Phillips movies again is that it's capturing more or less a piece of your youth. One road trip, there was a college experience and doing a road trip and that type of fun. Here, you're married now, you're out of college, and now you're having those thoughts like, what am I? Should I be married? And again, Vince Vaughn is like the ultimate married guy. I've known plenty of guys like Vince Vaughn. I mean, they didn't own Circuit Cities or Speaker Cities, but plenty of married guys have that mindset. And it's more or less, what am I? That's the whole journey. Mitch, he was married. He was doing his thing. That world imploded when he came home early from a trip. And he's rediscovering himself. He's going back to the past, but he's finding out what makes him happy. And I think that's a voyage and path that we all take in life. And again, it's funny as hell. You're my man, Blue. There's so many scenes. My favorite scene's a dart in your neck. You got a fucking dart in your neck. It's hilarious. It's a great movie. And again, it's one of those comedies that has aged well with me. I find the humor hilarious, and I find the source material and the whole root of what he's trying to say very telling, because I lived through all that. So again, that's why I have Old School at, what number was it at? 17. I wanted it higher, but there's so many other great films that are coming about, and we're going to get to them in just a bit. You got a fucking dart in your neck. Okay, coming in at 16 is Step Brothers, starring Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly again for the second time. And it's tough to review this movie, to be honest, because this is, how do you describe Will Ferrell movies with John C. Reilly like this? It's stupid. It's stupid. It's ridiculous. And some, I can understand watching it for the first time, be like, this is the dumbest thing ever. Why are you laughing? But then you see it a few more times and it's like, oh, this is funny. You get the jokes. It's stupid, but yet it's comedy gold. And I don't think anybody else could pull this off if it wasn't for Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly's chemistry. In this movie, you got two older adults who have children, older children who need care, I guess, and been living with them for quite some time. They choose to get married, and these two older siblings have to coexist. And it's pretty funny how they go about doing this. And you have the drum scene with the nuts and so forth, and then the Catalina wine mixer. If you notice I'm kind of rambling about this, it's because I'm struggling describing what is great about Step Brothers. It's just a funny movie. And if I say the jokes out loud, they don't make any sense. For example, there's this one scene where Will Ferrell is digging a grave and buries his brother alive. And his brother is saying, please don't bury me alive. Describing it is not funny, but seeing it, it is. You see what I mean? So it's tough to describe these types of movies, especially when it's just dumb idiocy. And it's not smart. It's not witty like some of the other films I'm going to go to. There's not like elaborate setups in the background, visual gags. Those usually get me to laugh out loud. But with these films, it's just ridiculous humor. And I'm pretty sure these were probably ranked low in Cody's ranking. I'm pretty sure because that's not his type of humor. But for me, I loved it. Again, I saw it in 2008 when it came out. I laughed my ass off. Seeing it again, I chuckle. It just doesn't age with me. I don't know what it is. But again, it is funny. And I'm kind of ranking it on the novelty of nostalgia, which I'm trying not to do with all these videos. But again, Step Brothers, I have at 16. Coming in at 15 is Happy Gilmore. I eat pieces of shit like you for breakfast. You eat pieces of shit? No. Adam Sandler gold. In my opinion, this film, along with Billy Madison, were maybe the Water Boy I throw in there as well. These were the prime years of Adam Sandler with that type of humor was ridiculously funny. Here, he just plays a hockey player who wants to play hockey, but he's no good at it. So he goes into golf. And again, the movie is pretty funny, having this kind of renegade, this guy, this outlaw, this hockey player in the golf world, more or less horrible at hockey, but he loves the sport. He can never make it. So he goes into golf and he ends up, that's his thing. That's what he's great at. But again, this is Adam Sandler humor at its best. Shooter McGavin's one of my favorite villains of all time. I love that particular actor. I forget his name, is more or less always known as Shooter McGavin, no matter where he goes. And believe it or not, that final scene where the final confrontation with him and Happy Gilmore are at that tee, he actually hit that golf shot, and that his reaction to it was actually authentic. I just saw that on TikTok a few months back. So again, I love that character. He's a great villain. Yeah, Ben Stiller in there who plays a quick cameo. Everybody in here is like perfectly casted, and it's a funny movie. Carl Weathers, rest his soul, he was great in this film as well. So again, Adam Sandler at his best after these particular films, especially after The Waterboy. It wasn't for me. But again, Happy Gilmore, that's why I have it at 15. The Price is Right, bitch. He actually fought with Bob Barker. That's pretty hilarious. Coming in at 14 is The World's End, the final film in the Cornetto trilogy. If you know, you know. Now, this film is really, it hits me in a lot of feels in a lot of ways, because Simon Pegg plays a character named Gary King, and he and his friends graduated the same year of high school as I did. So having that first 10-minute kind of nostalgia recap of where their lives were in the 90s, from the music, how they dressed, how they behaved, the editing style of the beginning intro of that movie, it's very nostalgic, and it reminds me of my 18-year-old self back in the day. And just the optimism you have in life, and everything is possible. The world's in front of you. I love how they stayed up all night. They're on that hill. They're looking at the sun rising. And it's like the world is right in front of you. Anything could happen. And as you know, in life, as you get older, sometimes it works out for some, sometimes it works out for others. So I love how this character, Gary King, peaked in high school. And what he wants to do, he wants to accomplish one thing. And that's an epic pub run of these 12 or 13 pubs that he and his friends never finished. So he gets his friends all together and they go about this quest to conquer these pints. And then as they're doing so, they find out that their town was overrun by aliens. And of course, that's when things go over the top, like any Edgar Wright movie does. And again, I love this film. It's hilarious. And it's tough to describe an Edgar Wright film because every shot and every sequence, every transition is beautifully planned. Every sequence, every music montage is tied to the movie. The lyrics mean something to what's going on. There's so many layers within an Edgar Wright movie they deserve more recognition and more praise, in my opinion. And let's not forget the brutality of the movies. All three of his movies are epically violent. And I think that's what a lot of people appreciate. They're funny, they're grounded, but they're also over the top violent. And I think that adds, I want to say, some charm to his movies, in my opinion. And I love Edgar Wright films. Any film he does, I'm a fan of. And that's why I have At World's End at number 14. Okay, coming in at 13, we're almost at the top 10. I have Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Now, this movie I recently reviewed again on my channel. You can look up the full review there. But in essence, what I walk away with Ferris Bueller's Day Off is that it's a fun movie. It's nostalgic, of course, but I love the core message of the movie is that life can pass you by if you don't take the time to smell the roses and enjoy yourself. Take a day off and enjoy life. Go live. Don't get caught up with the routine. Don't get caught up in your mind. Just enjoy life for what it is while you can. So I love that message. But in hindsight, I've watched that video. Ferris Bueller's kind of an asshole. He's a liar. He's an asshole. He used Cameron's dad's vehicle and took it out on the joyride. I mean, what the fuck? Who does this little prick think he is? But the movie is hilarious. It's got plenty of epic scenes that I quote all the time. Pardon my French, but you're an asshole. If it's on TV, will I stop and watch it? Yes. I don't care how many times I've seen it. Do I get goosebumps every time I see the twist and shout scene? Yes, because again, it's just a person in the movie, in the world, saying the message, live life, be spontaneous, have fun. I totally appreciate that. But again, as you get older, you watch it, you realize there's a lot of problems that Cameron had, suicidal tendencies, which is treated as like a joke in a way in the movie. But again, these are some serious issues that a lot of us grew up with, especially with parents who are maybe giving us not the attention we deserve. So there's a lot of dark layers in the movie that you discover when you see it as an adult. But again, if you want to check out my latest review, it's right there after this video. But again, that's why I have Ferris Bueller at number 13. And coming in at number 12 is the first film in the Cornetto trilogy, is Shaun of the Dead, which is personally one of my top favorite zombie movies ever. And I recall when it came out, I'm like, another zombie movie? Like, what is this? I'm not going to watch it. So I never saw this in the theaters. I saw it when it was finally like available for rental, and I saw it. And I just remember I could not stop laughing when I saw it. It was so clever. It was so edgy. Again, Edgar Wright with the edits and the cuts. Every transition means something. Every joke is set up beautifully and perfect. And I love that it plays homage to the movies that we've seen in the past. And of course, just the sequences and editing. That one of my favorites is Queen playing Don't Stop Me Now, and they're beating over like the bartender with cue sticks, and they're going with the beat of the music. The lights are flashing in sequence to the music. So that's when I fell in love with Edgar Wright and all his movies. And I love the attention to detail that he brings to that. And again, the gore, as I mentioned earlier, there is gore in these movies. I mean, it doesn't hold back. Some of the deaths are pretty horrific. I'm talking like Day of the Dead horrific level. Some people are being ripped apart and all that stuff. So again, I love that it doesn't hold back. It is a zombie movie. It is a true zombie movie, but it's also a comedy. And if you were to tell me at surface level, like before this was made, hey, we're going to make a zombie comedy, what do you think? I would have thought it would have failed horribly, but they made it work. And again, that's why I have Shaun of the Dead at number 12. And coming in at 11, I was really trying to get this in the top 10, and it was at one point. But again, there's so many other films that are just stacked against this. And I'm not saying this is not a top 10 worthy film, but in my opinion, it almost made it. So it's at 11, and that's Coming to America. Back when Eddie Murphy was pretty much raw, it had adult content. I don't know why he went to like the child-friendly content in the 90s and 2000s, but Eddie Murphy and the rated R presence in that world is unbelievably funny. In this movie, you have Prince Akeem, who doesn't want to get married yet. He wants to go live and find a queen that loves him for who he is. So he leaves Zamunda to go find a queen in Queens and sow his royal oats. There's so many scenes in this movie that are epic. I'm talking So Glow, the bartender sequences. And I think this is one of the first movies where Eddie Murphy was playing multiple characters. In a movie, he played a Jewish person, played the bartender. I mean, it's pretty funny and seamless how it is. And again, this is directed by John Landis. I know he's more of a controversial director now, considering what had happened. But in the 80s, when it came to comedic films, he was great. The Blues Brothers being one that I love. And you can see that video there. But the comedy's edgy, the comedy's fun. One of my favorite sequences is, "Good morning, my neighbors." Hey, fuck you. Yes. Fuck you too. Oh my God. This movie is hilarious. And I love how it's kind of like an inverse joke where we see the brothers, the Mortimer brothers from Trading Places as homeless people, and he helps them with money. That's a great joke as well. But again, this is, oh my God, I wanted this in the top 10. But again, there's so many other great films that they had to be there. I couldn't move them around. But Coming to America was an epically funny movie. To this day, it's hilarious. Part 2, I don't even want to bring up, but I did already, but that was horrible. It doesn't exist. Coming to America 2 doesn't exist, but Coming to America is an all-time American classic film, one of Eddie Murphy's best, and I love it. And I wish it was at number 10, but it's not, so it's at 11. Now we're in the top 10, and I may take a little bit more time with each one of these films because they're special in their own way in my life. So number 10 is my favorite of the Cornetto trilogy, and that is Hot Fuzz. As I mentioned earlier, I truthfully feel that the Edgar Wright films don't get enough credit from a technical standpoint and how brilliantly they are made. There's so many references and so many moments in the movie that are just a second worth on screen, but they're funny. Like there's this one scene where the chief of police at the end is just sneering at the screen, but he's got this explosion going around him. It's funny, but the amount of time it took just to capture that moment is hilarious to me, and it just shows a testament to his work and what he wants to get on camera. Simon Pegg plays a police officer named Nicholas Angel, who is so good that his entire department wants him off because he's making everybody else look bad because he's so good. So they vote him off and send him to the countryside in a small department. Everything looks pretty much boring. There's so many deaths that kind of happen, but they're by accident. But upon further investigation, there's this huge climax at the end. And when it comes to bad guys, you picture your stereotypical Hollywood bad guy. And I find it hilarious that the bad guys in this movie are old people in this community. Seeing Simon Pegg drop kick an old woman is hilarious. Seeing a priest get shot and yell, Jesus Christ, that's that's funny. That's funny to me. I mean, there's the Point Break references. There's the Bad Boy references. This movie is just an homage to that type of action film, but I love it that it's comedic. It's also brutal with its violence, and it's very graphic as well, so it doesn't hold back with that. But the film, the casting, the dialogue, especially the editing, there's so many times I watch this movie, right? And every time I see it, I catch something new. And I appreciate that because it just shows that so much is going past your senses and your eyes that you just totally missed it. But upon second viewing, I found myself cracking up out loud. Like, oh, I didn't catch that. That's pretty funny. So it's a brilliant movie. I love the time and effort it took to make this film. It's got that dry humor that I love. And that is why I have Hot Fuzz. Again, my favorite of the Cornetto trilogy at number 10. Coming in at number 9 is a very sentimental movie for me in my life, and that's National Lampoon's Vacation, starring Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo. I grew up with this movie. This is one of the first movies I remember seeing as a kid that I saw my parents laughing at, and it caught my attention because, again, my parents think it's funny. It must be the funniest thing in the world. And I saw it with them, so I grew up with this. So there's a lot of sentimental value with this particular movie, because it reminds me of my parents, and my dad has passed. We all, you guys, if you follow me, you know about that. So it's very close to my heart. And believe it or not, the character Chevy Chase, Clark Griswold in this movie, every woman I've ever dated said I act like him. So I don't know if it's because I saw it and everyone laughed at what he did. So I kind of mimicked that. So his sense of humor, that dry wit, how he's clumsy. I've been told that it reminds them of me. So believe it, I don't know why, but I really hold this movie fond in my heart because in the beginning of the film, you have Clark Griswold, who is a preserver specialist for food or something of that nature. And he wants to take his family on vacation. And I love the fact that he's a father who loves his kids because he tells his wife that, these kids are growing up. I go to work. I hardly see them at the evenings. And before you know it, they're just going to be moving out and I'm missing out on their childhood. So I want to spend time with them and have a family vacation. And as a father who loves his kids, I can totally relate to that. So he goes on this vacation thinking it's all going to go great and everything goes horribly wrong. This is another film that I can see countless times. If it's on right now, I will stop what I'm doing and watch it. The Holiday Road is a classic in my head. I play it on every road trip that I go on. Is just that tradition that I have embedded in me because of this movie. And keep in mind, this is Chevy Chase at his prime as far as popularity goes. He just came off Saturday Night Live a few years back. So every movie that he was putting out there from Fletch was just a big hit. And it's that dry humor, that witty humor where it's not, yes, he's an idiot and he is your normal everyday fool, as he says, but it's not over the top like Dumb and Dumber. It's not stupid humor like Will Ferrell. He's just a dad who makes dumb decisions and it's funny. And I think that's what makes it timeless in my opinion. I love this movie with more than you know. It's made an imprint on myself and in my life in many ways. And especially looking at it from a father standpoint. When I was a kid, I saw it from the kid's point of view, but as a dad, I think I can relate to him in that sense where, you have a very small window of family time with your kids, especially if you're the provider and you're hardly seeing them. So I love the fact that he loves his kids so much. He wants to spend time with them. So again, there's a lot of this movie that's embedded in me. I love it and it's close to my heart. So that's why I have Vacation at number 9. Real tomato ketchup, Eddie? Nothing but the best. And coming in at number 8 is Young Frankenstein. Now, I didn't grow up with this movie. I didn't see it as a kid. I saw this film for the first time about 6 years ago. I heard it was great. I didn't pay attention to it. And finally, one day I saw it and I cracked up. I loved it. And I actually did a review on that. If you want, you can check it out there. In my opinion, what makes Young Frankenstein a timeless classic is that it's really one of the first parodies out there. Yes, there's been parodies before in film history, but this is Mel Brooks in 1974 playing homage to the Universal monster movies that he grew up with. And I will admit, being that I had seen Frankenstein, The Bride of Frankenstein, The Son of Frankenstein, all these films, I got all the references, especially the Gene Hackman reference in this particular movie. It helps to have seen those to get the jokes. But I actually compare Young Frankenstein in many ways to Scary Movie of the 2000s, and let me explain. We're talking two completely different generations of filmmaking here. Again, as I mentioned already, you have Mel Brooks, who grew up with the Universal monster movies, and then you have the Wayans brothers and Keenan Ivory Wayans, who grew up with the Halloween movies and the slasher movies. And what I especially love about Young Frankenstein is it really plays homage to the filmmaking of the time of the 30s. Mel Brooks used the same movie sets and the same movie props from the Universal films in the 30s in this movie. It's shot in black and white like the films it's referencing. And what I love about Mel Brooks is that it's referencing these movies, yes, but he's creating an original story within the universe to make it its own film. And what Mel Brooks is brilliant about is the timing, the visual gags, the joke setups that he does, and just the physical comedy. And what I love about Gene Wilder and Madeline Kahn and really everybody in this film is they're playing it straight within their universe. They're not over the top like Jim Carrey or Will Ferrell in these movies just being stupid. They're playing it straight as they are. They're playing it as the character. And I think it's that dry humor and that wit and that banter that they have back and forth that just is timeless in my opinion. And I know this film may not be for everybody, especially for the younger crowd. But again, if you appreciate filmmaking, if you appreciate comedy and great writing, great timing, and visual gags and setups, this movie has it all. I love Young Frankenstein. It's a classic, and that is why I have it in my top 10 at number 8. Coming in at number 7 is A 40-Year-Old Virgin. And I have to admit, if you think about all the films that we've talked about already, this film has a unique premise when you consider that the main protagonist is a 40-year-old virgin. And the whole goal of the movie is to get laid. And I think that kind of makes it relatable to the everyday guy, because Steve Carell in this movie is a genuine nice guy. He's wholesome. He's likable. You're rooting for him. So to see him uncomfortably make his moves throughout this world and taking advice from these friends who are just idiots and going out to the clubs, it's hilarious because it's kind of like a fish out of water sort of tale, but it's relatable and genuine in my opinion. And I think it's heartfelt. That's why a lot of us care about the character. We all feel awkward going into spaces we've never been in, so we can relate to the quirkiness of Steve Carell's character. And again, if you look at the cast, the ensemble cast, everyone's done great. Seth Rogen, Paul Rudd, everybody has done absolutely fantastic in Hollywood, and the chemistry on screen is there. And then I think that's what makes it a revisitable film. We all want to revisit the film. And it's funny, the way the lines are delivered, the comedic timing, Kevin Hart shows up in that one sequence. It's funny. And it's funny, and I said relatable already, but there's a character in this movie that I think every guy has a friend or somebody that they can pinpoint, hey, that's so-and-so, that's what I would say, that's what I would act like. It's a relatable film for the genuine person. The chemistry is so good, it almost feels natural. It feels like everything was done with one take because the camaraderie amongst the cast members is so genuine. That's what it feels like to me. In other words, it's a realistic portrayal of male friendships, how we get along with each other, how we feel we can help a person out when they're feeling down, like delivering them a box of porn, the bantering back and forth, and how we genuinely care about each other. It's all there. And again, that's what I feel makes it timeless and relatable. It's quotable. I don't know how many times I quote my friends, like, you know how I know you're gay? You liked Halloween Ends, something stupid like that, but it's funny. It's a classic film, and I don't care how many times I've seen it. I laugh at the jokes every single time because of the wholesomeness and just a genuine fun that they're having on screen. And that is why I have it at number 7. Coming in at number 6 is possibly one of my favorite spoofs of all time. It's my second favorite Mel Brooks movie of all time. I've seen it countless times, and I find it hilarious to this day. And I still find jokes that were embedded in the film that I didn't get as a kid, but I understand as an adult. And that movie is Spaceballs. And I want everybody to understand something. This movie came out 5 years after The Return of the Jedi. And that was when HBO had started showing these movies. So a lot of us who didn't grow up watching them at the theaters, we started understanding what these movies were. We started understanding that Star Wars collectively, all these movies, all three, or a big story. And that, in my opinion, is when the popularity really started to grow within the younger generation. And keep in mind, this is the 80s when parodies and spoofs were a big thing. You remember Weird Al Yankovic? His videos were just as popular as Michael Jackson back in the 80s. So that type of comedy is what we liked and what we appreciated. And again, what I loved about Weird Al and Mel Brooks as these are technically spoofs, not parodies. Parodies are more or less a reenactment of the source material, frame for frame, kind of like what Cody and I did with that Billy Madison skit we did, announcing the 31 and 31. Spoofs are more or less taking the hallmarks of the source material and creating something new, like Mel Brooks did. Spaceballs is a spoof. It's taking the source material of Star Wars and making its own thing. There is no rebellion in Star Wars. It's just one person fighting a dictatorship called Spaceball. And not only is it spoofing Star Wars, it's spoofing Star Trek, and it's also spoofing Alien. And there are jokes in this movie that, like I said earlier, that I didn't catch as a kid, but I understand now, like this sequence.
Hold it. I'll handle this personally. Jawohl, Lord Helmet.
I was always curious what he said, so one day I looked it up with the subtitles and I saw Jawohl, and I looked it up on Google, and it turns out it's German for yes, sir. So leave it to Mel Brooks to put a German soldier on board. And I understand with the younger generations, they may not think it's funny. Like some of my teammates on the Odd Top stream thought it was stupid and didn't laugh at all, and I wanted to dive in my phone and kill him. But I guess you had to be there. Mel Brooks is a comedic genius. This film is a classic, and that is why I have it so high at number 6. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the top 5. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Show the new guy on Odd Top Stream some love by hitting the subscribe button, hit the like button. I would greatly appreciate it. I've been on a quest for the past 2 years to get over to that 10,000 subscriber mark. With your help, I think we can do it finally in 2024. So let's go on to number 5. And number 5, I am placing it this high solely because of the theater experience I had with this movie and just the overall energy it had. I have never in my life been in a theater where everybody was just knee slap laughing. We were all teary-eyed. Everybody, it was like laughing at the Def Jam. We were all just hooting and hollering. We could not stop laughing in this movie. It was a fun, energy-filled theater experience that I have yet to feel again. No other comedy since this movie has had that type of energy in a theater, and that is why I'm placing it at number 5. And that movie is Something About Mary. The cultural impact, the cultural stamp this movie had is timeless. If Fairley Brothers, in my opinion, this is their best movie. Me and Myself and Irene, and of course Kingpin, didn't really land for me. I mean, they were funny, but they did not get near the popularity of Something About Mary. Ben Stiller plays a young nerd named Ted, who has a crush on Cameron Diaz, Amy, who is the most beautiful girl in school. He asked her out on prom, and she says yes, but unfortunately, because of a zipper accident, he was never able to go on that date. So he's gone his whole life with that what if, what could have happened if I went on that date, we could have been married, etc. So he goes on this quest to find her. And then that's when the tomfoolery kicks off. In 100% honesty, no other theater experience has come close to Something About Mary on a Friday night at 10 p.m. It's an experience I will never forget, and that is why I have it so high at number 5. Coming in at number 4 is Anchorman. Now, believe it or not, the very first time I saw this, I was a manager at the mall, and people were talking about, oh, you got to see this movie. It was Napoleon Dynamite and Anchorman. People were just talking about it. I saw Napoleon Dynamite, and I fell in love with it the first 30 seconds. Anchorman, believe it or not, I thought it was so stupid, I turned it off halfway. I go, I don't like people acting like idiots. The jokes are pretty much silly. It's not for me. So I gave up on Anchorman when I first saw it. I thought it was stupid. Then a few years go by, then it's on repeat on HBO, and I'm watching it, and I chuckle. It's the first movie, one of the first, very few, that actually got funnier the more I saw it. I guess I got adapted to that type of humor. And again, as I mentioned early on in this whole 31 on 31, I'm not a big fan of Will Ferrell comedy. There's only a few that land. It depends on who he's acting with, like John C. Reilly, Mark Wahlberg, and the other guys. That movie should have been on this list. In this particular one, it's the ensemble, Paul Rudd, and everybody else on there, Steve Carell. And I think it worked. I think for me, Will Ferrell comedies work best when he's with somebody like this cast that complements his humor, and it's like a back and forth. That works, and that is why this comedy, in my opinion, is his best movie. And this movie, like The Office, for example, has made a cultural stamp on how we speak, how we text, and how we talk to one another. In other words, if you quote Anchorman and somebody responds back with the Anchorman quote, you know they're cool, and now you're best friends. And I get the Anchorman movies along with the other Will Ferrell movies. It's like an acquired taste. It's not for everybody. I know probably in Cody's and CP's it's going to be on the bottom because it's just not for them. But for me, it grew on me. And again, it's the only Will Ferrell comedy that I adore and can watch on repeat. And I went and saw Anchorman 2, and believe it or not, I thought it was just as funny as the original, but as soon as the movie was over, I completely forgot about it. And it's funny how that works, right? It's the same dialogue, it's the same talent, different scenario, but it's not as quotable and it doesn't kind of register with us as an audience. So I can't explain why Anchorman 2 failed where part 1 succeeded when it's more or less the same movie, but I can't explain. But I have Anchorman at number 4 because of its odd placement in my life. I hated it at first and it eventually grew on me. And it's the one Will Ferrell comedy that I adore. Anchorman at number 4. Coming in at number 3 is my favorite Ben Stiller movie. I consider it his masterpiece, and that's Tropic Thunder. As I've already mentioned with the other films, Zoolander and Cable Guy, his scripts and his movies have a narrative where it showcases what the audiences in America are more or less obsessed with. In this movie, he highlights the obsession with Hollywood and celebrity, and how ridiculous some of those celebrities take that fame. Everybody is brilliant in this movie, but I think we can safely say the one that steals the show is Kirk Lazarus, played by the great Robert Downey Jr. Nowadays, there's no way in hell that you can get an A-list actor to go in blackface. But again, it works for this movie because, again, it's a parody of Hollywood. And it's odd when the movie was released, no one talked about Robert Downey Jr.'s blackface character. Everybody was more upset at Ben Stiller's character, Simple Jack. It's satire. And I feel in today's day and age, with a lot of people being incredibly sensitive over the silliest words, we need satire. We need to make fun of ourselves. And this movie is a perfect satire of us and the world we live in today. I love comedies that have balls and take risks. And this movie does that. But in my humble opinion, we need more comedies like this. We need comedies to push boundaries. We need comedies to say things that we're all thinking, but we're scared to see out loud, because it's a reflection of who we really are and not who we're pretending to be. In my humble opinion, this is Ben Stiller's masterpiece. I don't know if he can ever come close to this, but this is one of the best comedies ever made. And that's why I have it in my top 3. And coming in at number 2 is a pick that honestly, it was so hard for me to dethrone from number 1, because 1 and 2, the movies you're about to hear, they're easily tied for number 1. And if I can do a tie on 31 and 31, I would. But if I did, Cody, CP, Brian, and Shaun would explode like at the end of Ready or Not. I mean, I would break the rules. You can't do that. So for me, this movie is just as good as my number 1 choice. But coming in at number 2 is one of my favorite comedies of all time, and that is Airplane. Airplane is a masterclass of comedy. The comedy that I love, the straight-faced, matter-of-fact, play-it-straight comedy that necessarily doesn't have jokes in it. It's more or less a play on words.
Captain, how soon can you land?
I can't tell.
You can tell me, I'm a doctor.
No, I mean, I'm just not sure.
Or can't you take a guess?
Not for another 2 hours.
You can't take a guess for another 2 hours?
And visual gags.
I think the man sitting next to me is a doctor.
Sir, excuse me, sir. I'm sorry I have to wake you. You a doctor?
That's right.
In the movie, you have Ted Stryker, who's a Air Force veteran who has PTSD, and his relationship ends with a woman named Elaine. He loves her. He's trying to win her back, so he goes on the flight that she's working on as a stewardess to try to win her back. As he's doing so, he's telling people about how they met, and these people are just so sick of what he's saying. They don't want to hear it. They commit suicide. And I know that doesn't even begin to explain the plot, but that's more or less how it kicks off. And if you didn't know this, the movie is a direct parody of a 1950s movie called 0 Hour. And that's what makes this comedy funny. Nobody knew this was a parody of another movie. They played it straight and matter of fact, but it was hilarious. I've seen this movie countless times, and I'm still finding new gags that I completely missed as a kid. For example, this gag.
Oh, well, airport management, the FAA, and the airlines. Oh, cheats and liars. All right, let's get out of here.
He walked out of the mirror. It's a Zucker Brothers masterpiece, and if you haven't seen this movie, I highly suggest checking it out. And I would also highly suggest watching Top Secret. In my opinion, it should have been on this list. It's just as funny as Airplane, and it's Val Kilmer's first movie, so check it out. And that is why I have Airplane at number 2. I need to do a full-on review on Airplane. It's unbelievably funny, and this quick 2-minute segment piece about it is not doing it justice. Again, Airplane, one of my all-time favorite comedies. And coming in at my number 1 on this 31 on 31 A Night of Comedy is arguably the most controversial comedy ever made. It's a comedy that I guarantee you could not make in today's day and age. A comedy that is arguably one of the greatest satires ever made. The first movie to feature flatulence, abuse to the elderly, punching a horse and knocking it out, and shooting a Bible.
I implore you to pay heed to this good book and what it has to say.
And that is Mel Brooks' masterpiece, Blazing Saddles. Now, if you ask me what makes this movie so special, it does something that no other movie has ever done before. It takes the most hated word in racism and takes its power away. It showcases that people who use this word are morons. And it showcases the idiocy of racism. It's a satire on America at the time, possibly today. But growing up as a Hispanic and growing up in a low-income area with black families as well, this movie was adored by the black community and the Hispanic community because these are things that we saw firsthand, but it was funny to see how it made the people who use and abuse that type of word and that type of power as idiots. For a movie to take such a sensitive topic and to twist it into satire so we can laugh at ourselves and just see how stupid we're acting is brilliant and timeless. And I wish more movies had the balls to do that. And for those who don't know, Richard Pryor was actually a co-writer in this film, and he was supposed to star as a sheriff in this movie. But because of his drug habits and unpredictable behavior, Warner Brothers decided not to go with him and cast somebody else, and they went with Cleavon Little, who was amazing. Of course, Gene Wilder again. This is his second appearance in the 31 on 31. He plays a Waco kid. He's brilliant in this movie as well. If I can share a quick story, believe it or not, back in the 70s, 76, 77, when my parents thought they were pregnant with me, they had to go to the doctor and get a blood test. You couldn't go to the grocery store and get a test off the shelf like you can today. So they went to the doctor and they drew blood from my mom and they said, okay, we have about 2.5 hours. So call us in 2 hours and we'll let you know if you're pregnant. So my mom and dad were like, well, what do you want to do for 2 hours? And they go, well, let's go see that Blazing Saddles movie. And they went and saw it. And keep in mind, movies, the runtime back then in the 70s was different. A movie was sometimes at the theaters for years because, again, there was no home box office. You couldn't rent the movie. You know what I mean. So they went and saw Blazing Saddles. And then when the movie was over, they called the doctor and they found out they were pregnant and with me. And that's my close story to this movie. And aside from that experience, I respect movies like this and Tropic Thunder who take chances and take risks. Comedy is not supposed to be safe. Comedy is supposed to offend you. It's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. And it's supposed to make you look at yourself. You see, comedy helps us cope with our own follies and disappointments, our troubles with work, marriage, life, and our society. You see, comedy pulls us all together with a positive emotion and reminds us all that we're all the same. No matter where we come from or what we look like, we all have the same problems. And I think nowadays we need to look at ourselves and laugh a little bit more. That is why I love this movie, and that is why Blazing Saddles is my number 1 on this year's 31 on 31 A Night of Comedy. There's no other film like it. And that does it for my second appearance on this 31 on 31 A Night of Comedy. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, please let me know. Put some comments below. Hit the like button. Also hit the subscribe button. It would mean a lot to me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.